and a very, very warm welcome to everybody. If you haven't seen my message in the chat just yet, please feel free to put into the chat where you are joining us from today. It's lovely to be able to welcome you all to this new series of the Client Experience Webinar Programme, our first of 2023, and it's great also to see so many familiar faces, or at least names, coming up as you all join. If you are new to this programme, then you should know that we try to create a very safe and informal space when we are running these sessions. We love as much engagement as possible. If you're brave enough or willing to put on your cameras, so much the better for an extra level of engagement. We like that, but we love to hear your questions. Our speakers are always ready to respond to any questions that you might have, and we want this to be a really valuable session for you all. Today's session is on how to understand, engage and motivate your team across the generations. I'm very much looking forward to the session and the definition of the generations, but clearly this topic is of massive interest right now, just judging by the number of you that are attending today. And Gartner recently did a survey with HR directors, a bit like Denton's in terms of the audience for this programme, across 60 countries, and 800 responded. And the massive conclusion was the #1 priority for 2023 is increasing leader and manager effectiveness. So it's brilliant that so many of you have come today to be with us to engage in this really important topic. Our session today is being led by some of Denton's finest, by our very own talent, our Global Chief People Officer, Neelima Paladugu, and Magda Callas, who is our Global Talent Director. So I will now pass you over to their very safe and capable hands, and look forward to catching up with you at the end of today's session.
Thank you, Judith, and welcome everyone. Really excited to be here with you, especially on this particular topic that leaders across the world are searching for answers consistently and constantly. So this past year, I had the opportunity to travel across 10 to 12 countries. I guess travel finally opened up and it was time to meet everyone. And there were two topics that popped up more frequently than any others. One was, how do we win the Great Resignation? And I'm hoping that's a question that's passé right now. And the second one, how do we manage these millennials and Gen Z? Didn't matter which country in Europe, in Asia, or North America, or even Latin America. The questions were always similar. How do I work with my junior lawyers? I don't understand what they want. They don't seem to want to do any work. Who are these people and why are they like that? And it always caused me to laugh, sometimes internally, sometimes externally. Made me wonder, maybe this is like the old adage, men are from Mars and women are from Venus. So I wonder which planet or universe are the millennials and Gen Z from? But jokes apart, that's the journey that we're going to go through over the next hour, is unpacking that question and hoping to add highlights and information from years in HR. But before we do that, I'd love to understand who we have on this call. And by the way, this is going to be the theme of the call. It's going to be an interactive session, so get ready to be active on chat and on our polls. And the first poll is up. So let's see who we have here. And the answers are pouring in. We've got a lot of.
We can see the sliders changing as you're answering.
That's great.
Fantastic.
I think we have our answer here. We have a combination of Gen X and millennials, and we have some baby boomers. So thank you for sharing that information. And here are the results, so everyone can see. Now, here's an interesting question, and feel free to use chat to respond. How many of us think of millennials as just having started work and as a small proportion of the workforce? This is what I often hear. Oh, they're just coming in. But here are the stats. Millennials make up 35% of our workforce in the US, and I'm glad to see the representation is quite similar on this call. And the oldest millennial is over 40 and in leadership roles. So it's an unprecedented time where we definitely have 4 generations, if not 5. At Dentons, we do have 5 generations. And the 5th generation is the silent generation or the traditionalists, and they're over 70. Now, here's another question. How many of you have a diversity program at your firm? Any quick responses in chat? Most likely a yes from most people, right? But how many of you have a diversity program that focuses on age diversity as part of their DEI strategy? Yes or no? The answer is most likely no, not really. And this is in tune with all the stats that we have been able to find. Only about a single-digit 8% of organizations include age as part of their DEI strategy. And I frankly think that's a missed opportunity, because age diverse teams are immensely valuable because they bring people together with so many complementary skills, information, networks, and if managed effectively, they can offer better decision-making, more productive collaboration, improved performance, name your advantage. So today we hope to shape that understanding over the next hour. And let's see where we are with our current understanding. So here's time for another set of poll questions. The first question here, this generation is considered to be laid back and relaxed. Which one? Just take a pick. And as you go through the questions, number 2, this generation prefers text and digital communication versus face-to-face. Number 3, this generation demands more flexibility and remote working. Number 4, this generation always talks about pay and wants more. Number 5, this generation moves jobs frequently. Looks like our most popular response and our most popular generation is Gen Z. Is it because they're not represented here and they don't have a voice at the table here? Ramya, I like that comment. So let's see whether the answers compare to your comment. Okay, we'll have a quick glance through the results here. And you will see for the generation that is considered to be laid back, the majority are Gen Z, followed by millennials, a little bit of Gen X and baby boomers. The second question, very, very similar responses across the board, more leaning towards Gen Z and Gen Y, similar for question number 3, similar question number 4, similar question number 5. How true is it, is the question. And in order to explore that, we are going to go on a journey with a very simple concept. So Niamh, if you can take us away to our theme for today, which is to understand as the first step, how well do we understand the various generations that are part of our workforce and what strengths do they bring? How can we dig deep to truly accept that we have some differences, but maybe the answer is that we might be more similar than different. And where there are differences, how do we benefit from those differences? And then finally, what can we as leaders, as team members do to adapt our styles to engage and motivate our teams, our stakeholders, our clients, our customers because once again, the need for age inclusion is the need of today. We'll start with understanding. Do we know what IYKYK means, anyone? Something that I didn't know even 2 weeks ago? Right? Yeah, if you know, you know. Also very popular on TikTok and Instagram as a trending hashtag. So after this webinar, you will be in the know. And when someone says, those generations, you can say IYKYK. But before we dive into understanding, let's just level set. If you're looking for juicy details on why millennials and Gen Z are so very different, this is not the call to be on. There are enough articles, podcasts, TikToks, cartoons even, out there highlighting the differences, and everyone who's a self-styled psychologist has an opinion. So we are not going to debate on opinions or perspectives. Our approach today is different and real, and it is supported by research and polls and stats, and of course, years and years of experience in HR. So we will answer that first question. Let's take a look. Which generation is considered to be laid back and relaxed? And we thought, what better way than to see what the leading publications are saying? So that first one that you see there is a Time magazine cover that says 20-something and laid back. Let's take a look at another Time magazine cover. Ooh, and this one also says millennials are lazy and entitled and the me generation. But something's not right here. If we take a look at the timestamps, the first one is in the 1980s and the second one is more recent. So apparently Gen X are laid back and lost, and so are the millennials. Maybe let's try a different publication, the New York magazine. Ooh, the Me Decade. This must be the millennials, but the cover page looks a little dated. It's from 1975. So wait a minute, the boomers have more in common with the millennials? What's going on here? And so here are the stats, right? When we think about a laid-back generation, there are perceptions that abound, but apparently those perceptions existed at every single change in generation. And I wonder why, and that's what we're going to explore. But let's look at the rest of the questions. One of the questions that we all answered is around technology, the generation that prefers text and digital communications versus face-to-face. Our responses indicated that it was mostly millennials and Gen Z that prefer to use digital communications. But here's what research shows. And this is a study there's a study by London School of Business and PwC that indicates that 80% of millennials and 78 to 80% of Gen Z prefer face-to-face conversations at work. And this is not just some microcosm of 500 people or 200 people. The study actually covered 40,000 people in 22 countries. And then you also see here, Gen X actually uses social media more than any other groups, spending an average of 40 more minutes per week online than millennials do. Quite interesting. Then our next question, which generation tends to talk about pay or is focused on pay? Again, the responses were skewed towards millennials and Gen Z. Maybe the generation that talks more about pay could be the Gen Z and the millennials, but all studies indicate that all generations expect regular pay increases. And you see here, whether it's 91%, 90%, 87%, there's too many similarities here around all the generations thinking pay is important. And then comes the question of flexibility, a question that has been asked way too many times these last couple of years. Oh, we're in a hybrid work environment and a remote work environment after the pandemic because we cater to our younger generations. But is that true? And here are the stats again. 80% of workers across all generations said work-life balance is important to them. Flexibility is important to them. It's not limited to a specific generation. And then we have career. Oh, this is another, myth that needs to be busted. The millennials have been known or called or perceived as the generation that moves jobs very quickly or very frequently. But lots of research, including the one that you see here, as well as a Pew analysis, as well as a Department of Labor study, all indicate that millennials are just as likely to move as Gen Z, as Gen X. And why? It's actually more focused on life stages than on generations. So when Gen X were between 26 and 35 or 40, they moved just as much as the millennials within that age group have moved or are moving. So it's the period in people's lives versus the generation that they come from. So that's just a little piece of information to help with our understanding. And Magda, can you take us away in how we can deepen that understanding to be able to accept what it is that we are hearing and the difference between what we are seeing and where the stats are taking us today?
So, as you said, our model starts with understanding, and we just did a little bit of that. The second step is accepting. If you think about your team at work, there will be differences. There will be differences, obviously, because of different generations working together. But there will be other differences. There will be differences because people come from different countries. You might be working with your team members that are located far away. Nalima is based in the US and I'm based in Poland. Obviously, there are cultural differences between us. We also work across departments. So there will always be differences at work, whether generational, cultural, or functional. But what we want you to take away from today is that actually we have more in common than we may think. But before we get to that, we are going to share some stats. I know that no webinar, article, presentation about generations can do it without statistics. This is what makes the headlines. So we will go through the stats. Don't worry about that. There will be some salient numbers to take away. So let's start with the first one, which takes us back to this question around job hopping and loyalty, right? Why do those Gen Zs and millennials change jobs so frequently? So again, some numbers coming from a research across 6 countries, and that research was done by Egan Zender and Kearney, and we chose some really interesting questions that they asked. So question number 1 was around advancing career and whether people would rather change jobs than work their way up a single organizational hierarchy. A lot of us work in a single organizational hierarchy, right? This is how most companies are formed right now. So you would typically think that the Gen Zs would rather leave than go up the hierarchy. And it's true to an extent, because actually research shows that it's the millennials that would do that. But the Gen Zs, the Gen Xs are probably, they would rather stay in a single organizational hierarchy than move jobs. Now we talked, there's a lot of talk, and we also brought up some statistics around portfolio careers, right? It's, if you work in HR like we do, it was a buzzword. It's been a buzzword for quite some time. So a question we wanted to bring up was, I prefer a permanent full-time job over a portfolio career combining multiple income streams. So, mix of full of part-time job, freelancing, consultancy. It's important for us as organizations and as leaders, because ideally you would want the majority of your team to be in a permanent full-time job so that you can work with them and use their skills when you need. So what about those job hopping Gen Zs and their portfolio careers? Well, interestingly, Gen Zs are not that different than the boomer generation, right? Actually, most of them, over half of Gen Zs and half of the boomer generation, they prefer a full-time job over a portfolio career. And interestingly, even more so for millennials and Gen Xs. And I wonder, Naima, whether the recent events in the world stage has changed that outlook as well, whether the need for stability is driving some of those approaches and attitudes.
Right. And Magda, I think it's not just recent changes. It's very easy to align stats with recent events. But if you think about what millennials and Gen Zs have said all along, the one thing that comes back, and studies indicate this as well, is they have shown loyalty, more loyalty than other generations, when they have found that an organization is worthwhile and also is true to its values, has a focus on purpose, supports the sustainability of the world around them. And so it is not specific to the pandemic, it is not specific to a generation, but I think loyalty is inspired by how a firm, an organization, a company operates more so than any of the other factors. So let's perhaps take a look at that next.
Have a look at the purpose. And and again, the snowflake generation of Gen Z is probably the headline we've all seen. So would Gen Zs, millennials, Gen Xs, boomers change jobs if they feel they're not achieving something personally meaningful in their work? And the interesting takeaway is that most people would actually change jobs for that. So if you look at the quote on the left, if you help people find meaning in their work, if you give them a reason, many reasons to be proud to work for you, they'll stay working for you. And that is true for every generation, independent of the times, independent of the pandemic, independent of the war in Europe and the recession. Giving people a reason to be proud to work for you is a very powerful tool for employee loyalty. Let's look at some other areas that we've talked about already today, especially in our quiz. Right, the Gen Zs and the millennials that only talk about money and they want more. But what is this question really about? Is this about pay, or is it about pay transparency? Right? If you look at the stats across the generations, you will see that people sort of across generations sort of have similar views in terms of whether they get paid fairly. Interestingly, millennials and Gen Zs more often say that profits are not shared fairly. So there is that need for fairness and equality and equity. But what is really interesting, and Lima mentioned that in a moment ago, is that transparency. We brought a quote from an article in New York Times, which was really interesting. They did a vox pop. Basically, they interviewed people in the street around how much they earn. And this is a quote from Caitlin, who's an underwriter, who talks about the refreshing change in talking about money. If you think about Gen Zs, if you think about your younger colleagues, yourselves, your children, they have been sharing a lot of their private lives online. Hell, we've shared a lot about their private lives online, right? Even before they could say anything about it. So they are used to transparency. They see nothing wrong about sharing how much they earn because they believe in equality and fairness, and it's their way to drive fairness. So maybe the question is not about, oh, they want more money, because we've just seen that actually people across generations want to earn more, understandable, but it's about that transparency and ease of talking about pay that makes the difference. Okay, so we've talked about the pay, we've talked about loyalty, we've talked about the purpose, but you're on this call because probably each of you manages generations, people across generations, right? You have people in your team to manage, to engage, to inspire, to empower. So we thought we would bring some research around what characteristics of an ideal leader different generations value. And when I saw this, my first impression was there isn't a lot of movement across the generations, right? The 7 key traits are fairly the same. There's a little bit of sort of movement around the sort of the Gen X and other generations, but the first 3 characteristics of an ideal leader are the same, or actually the first 7 characteristics are the same. What your people are saying: I want you to listen to me. I want you to understand me. And that is important for the boomers, and that is important for millennials, and it's important for Gen Zs, and it's important for us, Gen Xs. They're also saying, empower me. Give me interesting work. Share information. Ask me for my input. Make me belong. Make me want to belong here. And the third thing they're saying is share and be transparent. And this is really important, especially for Gen Xs, right? Tell me why you made that particular decision. I want to know. I want to know, to feel that I belong, right? So listen to me, empower me, and be open and transparent. These are the 3 traits and the 3 asks of your people, independent of whether they're 20, 25, 45, or 65. Right, we've shared some external research with you, and as I said, everyone likes a little bit of numbers. So let's do some research ourselves here. There's always power in any community coming together, and you're a powerful community of internal legal teams. So we thought we would ask you a question about your people in your own teams. And the question is, if you think about why people come to work for you, especially the Gen Zs, especially the juniors, based on what you have observed, what is the top motivator for junior legal talent to join an in-house legal function? Excellent. Keep them coming. We're seeing some interesting answers. Okay, are we ready to? We'll give you a couple of seconds more and then we'll share.
We might do a little countdown, Magda. We'll give everyone lots of, if anyone is selecting other, just pop it in the chat and let us know what you think. We've nobody so far that feels that it's something else that's the key driver. So we'll just do a little countdown. So 5, 4, 3. Any last indicators? 2. I see a few coming in. 1. Okay, great.
Excellent. Okay, are we ready to share the results? Right. So what is number 1? Work-life balance. Okay. Excellent. Number 2 is the quality of work. Number 3, if I'm not wrong, is the reputation of the organization as a business, right? How well you are known in the market. And then it's you as an employer, salary and benefits. Nalima, what's your take on what you're seeing?
This always amazes me at how differently the responses land in every single webinar that we do. But what doesn't surprise me is work-life balance, especially this past 2 to 3 years. Work-life balance has come up on top of every single poll, and not specific to any generations. If we think about where we are right now in the world, there's this new term that I've started hearing and seeing more and more. It's called perma-crisis. It seems like we are in permanent crisis mode, whether it was the pandemic, whether it is the war in Europe, whether it is now inflation and economic uncertainty, or political dichotomy across various parties within a country or across countries. There's just a lot happening right now. And when we are subjected, polycrisis, I like that. Polycrisis, perma-crisis, I think we'll continue to see various terms for it because it has been a constant. Typically, we come into a crisis, we step out of it, there's time to breathe before the next one comes in. And this generation, as in all of us, have not seen this type of crisis since the World War. And so work-life balance is on top of mind for everyone, not just our teams, our younger generations, but for all of us as well, for good reasons. So let's take a look at what the stats are saying for where our undergraduates, which is mostly the Gen Zs, what they believe is most important in terms of their decision drivers for joining a law firm. And we hope there's some similarities between why they select a law firm and why they choose to be part of an in-house counsel. Slight variances maybe, but mostly similar. I think we saw quality of work as number 2, so maybe we can equate that to type of work. But you see here, work-life balance, maybe because they haven't entered the workforce, but we can't say that our college students are not stressed out equally these days. But it's really the type of work, the quality of work, the brand for the organization, including their profitability, their revenue, industry rankings, their reputation, all of that together is what I'm calling the brand, is also very, very, very important. So once again, they're looking at business-related decisions as opposed to any me kind of decisions, or how do I make more money without working a lot kind of decisions, which is the perception. So I hope we've been able to break down some of those perceptions and break down some of that noise around the differences and how the differences are highlighted both in a very dramatic way or in a funny way, depending on who's choosing to highlight them. Just as Magda had mentioned, each one of us comes in with distinct characteristics, distinct personalities, and a distinct background. Even if we are of the same generation, I grew up in India, I lived in Australia, New Zealand, and now in the US. And I have no specific orientation from a culture perspective, but I am still influenced by my childhood in India. And so my perspective is different from someone who is of very similar age to me. And so taking into account all of those variances that make us who we are is, I think, the most important thing. The second piece that is emerging for us, and this is where we want to go into, well, we're beginning to understand all of these things around similarities and differences, but how do we adapt? What do we do? What do we do different? How do we go back to our desks after this hour? What do we do differently? And for me, and Magda and I have had lengthy conversations about this, and we've tested this in a few of our ecosystems. a simple framework of 3 things. Even sometimes 3 things is too many things to do, but let's give it a try. The first one is where we've seen some of those similarities, we've also seen differences. But you know, the differences come more from life stages. We saw the stats around Gen X and millennials moving at the same pace between a certain age. We saw the questions around pay similar for Gen X and the boomers around most likely the same age. The need for flexibility is similar across a life stage, or because of societal impacts. And so that's the first consideration. If we are to fine tune our policies, our benefits, our approach, our communication with our team members based on the life stage that they are at, putting the individual at the center and not a generational generality associated with that individual, I think we have done ourselves a big favor and our team giving them the right space. So let's take a look at life stages, and we will go to the other 2 in just a little bit. If we go to the next slide, you know, we've tried to depict some of the very commonly understood life stages here. You know, people coming into the workforce, wanting to be empowered through their work to build a personal life, whether it is a house, whether it is travel, whether it is paying off their loans, depending on which country you are in. You just really don't want to send your kids to school or university in the US. My 2 teenagers are getting ready to go to college, and my question is, how am I going to pay for their fees? But that is my life stage, which is somewhere up there. It could be a stage where they are looking at career enhancement. How do I guide my career to be more successful? Or how do, you know, given the recession that's coming, do I have the right skills in order to stay, you know, safe or transition, whatever the question is that is on top of people's mind at that stage? Or around family and or around caregiving for aging parents, which is a topic that is popping up more and more and more. How do we provide benefits that enable our people to take care of their family, whether it is children, parents, dependent partners? It doesn't matter. The situation is different for different people. And then there is the life stage around creating legacy and then preparing for retirement. And Magda, what this reminds me of, and I know we geek out on this, is also comparing this with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Is there anyone familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Going from safety to belonging to esteem to self-actualization. So similarly, this is a life path in any which way that we decide to look at it. But has anyone noticed that something's missing here on this slide? And it's ages. We haven't allocated any age groups to any of these stages. And if you're wondering why, I have a question for you. There are a couple of boomers on this call. So tell me, what is your sense of when you became an adult? At what age did you consider yourself an adult? Just pop it in the chat. Do we have any responses? And then Gen X. At what age did you see yourself coming of age or being an adult? Yep, we have 1 response. Keep them coming. Yep. I have 35 there, yes. So here's the thing. Another point from conversations and also some research. The age at which one considered themselves to be an adult has shifted. From the boomers, stating it as somewhere between 16 to 18, becoming independent, beginning to vote, all of those things, to the Gen X, which is mostly around 21 to 22, to now the millennials around 25, and it could get later as the generations keep going. Similarly, I like that statement around when I had children of my own. Yeah, it forces you to grow up. It at least forced me to grow up. Otherwise, I was wandering around the world. So there's that around when we think we have become adults versus when the next set of generations believe that they need to be an adult. Adulting is quite complex, and I think we want to put it away or put it off for quite a long time. Think about the next stages as well. When someone chooses to have a family is also shifting quite by a bit. And so we chose not to be prescriptive with the age range for each of these life stages because they're no longer consistent. The expectations do not work with reality. And so let's free ourselves as well from the age-based expectations and just know that the life stages are similar for people. There are some that may choose not to have a family. There are some that may choose to have a career that is more horizontal than vertical. So even within life stages, we need to be open to how we think about people. How does this resonate with everyone? I see some comments here. Yes, and you know, as a baby boomer, you were treated more, you know, with more freedom than what we perhaps are giving our children. We are, you know, if not helicopter parenting, there's other terminology for this. We are very, very involved in our children's lives, and they come to us before they make a decision. So when they show up at work, the reason they're asking for feedback from the managers is not because they want to be handheld, but they want transparent feedback. They actually, millennials and Gen Zs want more transparent feedback than most other generations, which is a very, very positive thing. So think about the dialogue that you've had with your parents versus what you're having with your children at the dinner table. Were you even at the dinner table with your parents is another question to ask for some of us. But as you see here, this life stage concept is really, really important. The next one, Magda, purpose. This is a project that we had undertaken throughout last year at Dentons to redefine and reimagine our purpose statement, and for a very good reason. So if you can walk us through that story and why we're actually talking about purpose, and it seems everybody else is also talking about purpose, and it's not just the millennials.
No, it's not. When I talked about how you engage people and how you make them stay, I talked about, you know, give them meaning. And we're all looking for meaning in life, in what we do. I know we're busy earning our living and climbing up the professional ladder, but deep down, all of us are looking for a meaning. And that can come from a lot of things. It can come from our personal aspirations. Who do I want to be as a person? What kind of family do I want to have? What kind of personal relationships do I want to have? It comes from our professional aspirations as well. Who do I want to be? And it comes from our social aspirations. What is my standing in society? Who am I vis-a-vis other people? So we develop our purpose and meaning in life based on those three dimensions. But what McKinsey's study showed is that 70% of employees said that their sense of purpose is defined by their work. Even though there is a personal dimension to all of us, there's a social dimension to all of us, our work defines to a large extent who we are and what the purpose is. So a bit of homework for you after this meeting is to take 5 minutes of quiet time. I know it's very rare currency these days. 5 minutes of quiet time, asking yourself the question, why do I do what I do?
Magda, I'm laughing because over the last couple of years, I want to know how many of us actually asked that question. And if there's anyone who didn't, I think the pandemic put us in a place where we actually all kind of bumped against a wall and said, why am I here? What am I doing? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And your team is no different. And here's the thing. When was the last time you asked your team about their purpose? But purpose is such an ephemeral question. If you ask someone, what's your purpose in life? It's so very difficult to answer. But this this format of understanding what someone's personal aspirations are, what their professional aspirations are, what their social aspirations are, what gives them meaning in life. So many different ways of asking that same question. And we have found, and we thought when we embarked on this journey and we started asking those questions, we thought we wouldn't get any response. But actually, in reality, we couldn't stop people from talking. It was just an outlet that individuals needed, and they were very, very open to share it. So give it a try. The second piece of homework, once you take those 5 minutes to connect with your purpose, 5, 15, or 50, do ask your teams. Create that safe space to begin to understand your team members around life stages, around purpose. And it is very important, and we'll explain why, for the third part of our framework. Magda?
Yes, so here's a bit of a revelation to a lot of people, especially to lawyers who love a bit of a transaction. And that is, if you think about the work environment, we often think about it as a transactional environment. You, employee, you give me your skills and your time, I will pay for them. Well, here's what science tells us. Science tells us that the brain experiences the workplace first and foremost as a social system, not as a commercial transaction. So another little snippet that we want you to take away from today is it's really not a transaction, it's a relationship. So finding time to engage with your people around your purpose or their purpose, finding time for social interactions is incredibly important. We ran a little survey among our leaders at Dentons during the pandemic and beyond around social interactions. I don't know how many of you work remotely or in a hybrid work environment, but in the times of especially remote work, but even so now in a hybrid, actually 70% of managers say that most of their interactions with their teams are purely transactional. I'm telling you what to do, I'm asking you to do something, or I'm asking you about something that has to do with work. So the way people experience us as managers and as leaders is mostly transactional. And somehow that doesn't compute with what the brain sees and perceives and needs. So what we're asking you to do, as Nalima said, is think about what is the social element of your interactions with your team? Is it purely transactional? And if so, think about how it can turn into more of a relationship and not just a transaction. So on that, so we said we like a little bit of a model, right? We like a little bit of a model, sort of the power of three. Nalima, what is our powerful three?
Yes, so hope your takeaways today will include listening to understand, asking your team members the questions, whether it is around purpose, whether it is around their life stages, whether it is around their highs and lows, whatever it is, listening to understand, and consciously creating a safe space and an inclusive space to accept differences where they exist, and looking to not only understand them, but accept them, and also accept similarities. And establish ways to intentionally adapt. Has anyone tried reverse mentoring? I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It is not a one-way stream when we mentor people. Try having one of a different generation than yours mentor you. And so many ways to create those intentional relationship environments versus a transactional environment. But at this point, let's check in. Out of all the things that you've heard, we've talked about how there are so many similarities. We are more similar than we are different. There's a lot of stats that support it. There's obviously a lot of noise. We've talked about a little framework here around understand, accept, and adapt. We've shared how we can adapt around life stages, around purpose, and around creating relationships. But for you, what resonated most? Just drop it in the chat. If there's one thing you'll take away from this call, what would it be? We do have a quiet audience. So, Magda, I think we have a reverse mentoring. They're coming in. Yes, more similar than we think we are. Yes, keep sharing. And in the interest of time, we do have just a something that both Magda and I found very, very touching. So we want to share that with you, that kind of seals in everything that we spoke about, even though it's not about generations, it's bigger than generations. Let's give it a try. And here's a mini video.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
Doesn't matter how many times I see that, it touches me very close to the heart every single time. So I hope you found this session useful. And what we are also trying to do is cut through the noise and share some simple and effective truths on LinkedIn. So do join us. And back to you, Judith.
Thank you. I'm still responding to the video, having only just seen it for the first time. So I suppose that, the fact that we're all together as a community in terms of having the desire to improve our leadership and all coming together and crossing the lines and being part of a common force for good is something that is really key to this program, I suppose, at its heart. So a very appropriate video to end on. Would love to say to you all, please come back and see us again next week. The topics that we try to cover on this program, as those of you that have attended or subscribed will know, are very varied. And next week, we're looking at risk differently, and your toolkit operational change, and that terrible word that many of us have to deal with, cost reduction. So if you want ideas around how to change your operational model to achieve those kinds of goals, then please do join us next week for that session. And as you can see, we've got a lot of great sessions coming up. If you would like the slides from today's session, then please do email us. Neve and I are on cxprogram@dentons.com. So just reach out with an email and then we will send you the slides. A recording of this session will be posted on our website in about a week, so you can access the recording or send it on to others within your team or peers or friends when you like after then. Otherwise, it just leaves me to say a massive thank you to both Neelima and Magda for all their work. The statistics were immense. So if anyone loves data, then clearly they delivered for you today. And the whole presentation, very interesting and inspiring. Please let us know what you think. If you'd like to put your thanks into the chat, we'd love to hear your comments. Otherwise, today's session is closed and we really look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks so much, everybody.